Hi, welcome back. In this lesson, we'll be painting a misty morning landscape. We'll be starting with wet paper and with very soft edges. Our values will be lighter. We'll be mixing more water, less pigment. But as we work our way through this painting, we'll be getting darker with our values and we'll be getting harder with our edges. The end result, I hope, will be a very foggy, misty, atmospheric kind of morning. It always helps me to have a plan in mind when I start a painting. Let's go back and remember our compositional sweet spots if we divide our paper into thirds. I'm going to put some very vague, misty, foresty kind of trees in the background over here, and I'm going to have them faded out. It's going to be light. I'll demonstrate that with a marker by just making my lines kind of farther apart. But over here, where I'm getting close to my sweet spot that I'm thinking about, over my upper right-hand corner, I'm going to make those darker trees and closer to my viewer. So I'm going to make an island in this misty lake here by now putting darker trees in this foreground area. And I think that I'll fade those out, but this is where people will look. This is where I want to have some interesting design, color, texture, value changes, some various differences, some variety, so that my viewer can be really interested. And right below it, in the sweet spot of the bottom third, I'm going to put some reflections. If this is all water, I think I'm just going to maybe make this kind of misty water. And let's see if we can make a mysterious, beautiful painting that way. If I wanted to, I could certainly put some more foreground in here. And this is going to be where you're going to have to kind of decide what you think looks the best. If I did put more foreground in, I would add that darker value down here. Lightest values in that back area, darkest values where I want my viewer to kind of be most drawn, and maybe some interesting kind of reflections coming down here so that it really looks like a watercolor. Okay, so once I have done a sketch, I take a scrap of a less than successful painting so that on the back of it I can do a little experimenting. I am going to use green. It's going to be a foresty kind of landscape, but I want to show you one way that I make a more intriguing green. I'm going to use some Prussian blue, and I'll put that on my little test sheet, and then I'm going to test it with a little bit of raw sienna. And when I put those together, it's actually going to make a green that's unexpected. Let's put it that way. It's not a boring green straight out of the tube, which can make your painting look really flat. I think this will give us some intriguing looks in this painting. Now, in order to make that work, let's go back to thinking about our plan a little bit. This back area, maybe that could be some of that raw sienna, some of that brown. It's really the yellow part of the brown that mixes with the blue part of the Prussian that creates green, because blue plus yellow, of course, is green. I'm going to start this back area with the lighter hue, the raw sienna, and as I add more Prussian to it, I'll be able to create these darker values towards the sweet spot of my painting, my center of interest. Let's give that a try. I don't feel like I need to even pencil anything in right now because I want to keep this very misty, very wet, very light. I think I'll be able to do that without even making any pencil marks. I'm going to start with a big mop kind of brush, if you have one. It could be your 1-inch flat if you don't, and maybe the largest brush that you have. This mop brush holds a lot of water, and I'm just covering my entire paper. I went horizontally, and now I'm going vertically across. Once I cover that with clean water, I'm going to just take a paper towel and wipe the edge of my tape to get that extra water at the edge off. I have a super wet tape line. When a little bit of pigment touches it, weird things start to happen. Let's put a little bit of a graded wash onto this paper just to kind of break the ice a little bit. I'm going to put quite a bit of pigment, not a ton, but a bit of pigment up at this top part of my painting. Rinse my brush out in my dirty bucket, then in my clean bucket, touch it again to that bottom edge so that I've got a super light graded wash of raw sienna. My paper is still very wet. I can see water on it. Tell you what I think I need to do. I'm going to tip this board and let some of that water run off the paper. Running down, you might not be able to see it. I'm tipping it towards me because I don't feel like I have a lot of control if there are big valleys full of water on here. Now, if I touch a little bit of Prussian blue in there, I'm hoping that I'll get some green action in this distant area. Watch what I do first. I took my flat 1-inch brush and I touched it in my Prussian blue. I've got a little bit of a puddle of Prussian blue going over there. Now, this brush is loaded. It's got Prussian blue in these bristles and some water. I'm going to take my paper towel and hold it to the bottom part of the bristles. Notice that it's above the ferrule, the metal part, but below the tip, below the edge of the bristles. And a lot of that water and pigment is wicking out onto the paper towel. Now, this is sort of a dried down brush. It won't run as much on this very wet paper. And when I put a little bit of a wiggly line of trees in that background, rinse my brush and wipe the bottom edge of that shape with some clean water, I'm going to get a distant sort of misty group of trees back there. I let this paper dry because it was so wet, I could still see shiny spots. I could still see a lot of water reflecting back at me. And I know that that makes the paint run in ways that's unpredictable. And I was afraid it was going to mess up my whole painting. As I look at this, what I notice is how light this back little forest of trees is. I've got sort of a nice misty kind of look because it was so wet, and I took that clean water, dragged it underneath the bottom, and some of that pigment just very softly melted out into that water. So that part I like. Problem I can foresee is that this value is so light. If I start painting darkly here, it's going to be a binary sort of painting. It's either a light or dark, and I kind of want it to be a little more subtle than that. So I'm rethinking my original sketch. The way I think I might revise it is that instead of having just this one field of trees in the back, that I'm going to add a second, slightly darker layer in front of these. This will add some depth to my painting. It's going to make sort of like 3 layers instead of 2, so I think it'll be more interesting. So I'm going to take some clean water, but instead of using that mop really loaded up, I'm going to just hold it in a rag or tap it on a rag, kind of get some of that water out of it. That was just too much water. And I'm going to cover this whole part of the painting that I've already done up at the top, just with some clean water. So my paper's now damp, but not soaked. I'm going to now take my 1-inch flat again, and this time I'll get a little more of that raw sienna on it, go to that raw sienna puddle, and I'm going to just touch in some of that Prussian blue so that I've got the same combo, but this time with a little more Prussian in it. And I'm going to go right over the top of that previous misty forest. Might have some of it go so that the mist really shows back there. It looks like clouds of fog, possibly. And now I'm going to start bringing it up above that distant part. And again, I'm going to take clean water and hit that bottom edge so that it just can disperse and create sort of a foggy look. Okay, now I'm not worried about over here, because remember, I'm going to cover this with some dark pigment. I'm worried about over here. I think it would help me to take a finer brush right here and a little bit more Prussian blue in my brush. Let some of that water out of it. I'm using a pointed brush now, probably a number 10 or a number 8. And I'm going to just hit that top edge of those trees a little bit. Doing this partly so that the detailing on that very top edge is a little more interesting. And I keep touching that down into the wet part of the paper so that that foggy effect can take place. And since I didn't do it with absolute perfection on my mixing, I've got a little more raw sienna here, and I like that. I like how it's darker blue here and more raw sienna there. It creates more intrigue. There's more variety already in this painting. Put a couple little more tree details in there. And I want this to sort of bleed out. I don't want people to be focused on whether those are perfect trees or not. It just has to be a suggestion. And again, the bottom edge, I want to be misty. So I'll take my flat 1-inch again in clean water, touch the rag maybe, and get that pigment broken up. I don't want that to settle into a line of color there. I want this to be vague. clean water, use my rag, and stroke that across. I'm going to take my spray bottle right now, and I'm just going to mist this a little bit. It's all fairly wet still. Even so, I'm going to mist it a little bit so that it dries a little bit speckled, and it kind of leads to some interesting stuff happening down here in this foggy area. I can see some really faint trees that are back there by that distant range, and then some trees closer. And now we'll be able to cover that with some darker, stronger trees in this at my sweet spot, at my right where I want my viewer to look. As this begins to dry, I take my critical eye and look at what's going on here. I like how there's some variety in the value. It's darker over here and it gets lighter. I like the variety in color in the palette. I can see areas where there's more of that raw sienna and other areas where it's darker, where it's more Prussian. I'm going to add another element of interest to those trees by taking a flat 1/2 inch brush, rinsed in clean water and touched in my rag, and I'm going to draw a few verticals, a few little trunks of the trees up in this area here where the light might be striking them on this strange, beautiful, misty morning. Right away, you can see that by throwing that little verticality in there, it's added some interest. I typically will put an odd number of those kind of elements in rather than an even number, and there's a lot of reasons for that. A little bit of it's superstitious, I think, on my part, but part of it is because odd numbers tend to group in interesting ways. Instead of, if you did 4 of these little strokes, it's okay because I've got 3 over here and 1 here. It's a little bit asymmetrical, but I think I'm going to put just one more little partial one, accent this area. And I will take my rigger with some of that light raw sienna and a little touch of Prussian in it, and just touch in a few little wispy bits of these trees here, a few little trunks. You can take a look at the tree portion of the videos if you're interested in practicing these little shapes a little bit more. And I'm going to, in a way, obliterate some of those verticals that I put in there, just because I really like to not do anything too much. So just variety means a little, a lot of different little things, but don't overdo any one of them. Again, I'm going to mist that a little bit to help kind of obscure and blend it all together. And I'm just going to let that dry. As it dries, I notice that this is going to create a line in the mist, and I take some clean water and I just massage it a little bit with my round brush. Just let it break up that pigment line a little bit. I think that'll make it a lot more juicy and interesting looking when it finally dries. So this is all, a lot of the things that I'm doing are really almost in the realm of a matter of taste, and I'm encouraging you to experiment with this. The more you play with this kind of stuff, the more you'll get your own little tricks that you finding things that you like, things that happen on your paper that bring you some joy and make you want to try it again. As this dries and I study it, I'm thinking still about my design, my overall composition. I think I'm going to revise this again. I've sort of developed a second layer of trees that are closer to my viewer that's a little bit darker value than this far back layer. And now I want to put this third layer, the one that's the major player in my drama. I think, though, to create this lake look, a water look, I'm going to have these trees very vaguely kind of come across my third layer. I'm looking right here. I think I want my big clump of main character trees to fade, but to linger out over into this area of the mist, to kind of add that depth to my painting. Experiment with this and let's see how it works. Let's see where we go with this. When I cover this paper with this third layer of trees, I want it to be pretty dark. And so I'm going to make sure that my paper is dry. I don't want this one blending as much as I did these misty ones in the distance. So I'm going to take a moment to let this dry even more. As I study this while it dries, I realize I really do like this very soft look, and so I think I am going to put a little bit of clean water in my area where the darker trees will be. And I'm okay with some of this sort of blending out towards the edge over on this right-hand side. I love faded edges and kind of vignette-y looking kind of paintings that sort of blur out as they get towards the edge. I know for sure I want the bottom edge to blur out. That's got to be sort of foggy in order to create this effect of a foggy morning. But I'm talking now about where these trees will actually be. And I want a lot of pigment in these trees, so I'm going to use a round brush that has softer bristles. It holds more water. I like this for getting a lot of pigment down fairly quickly. I'm going to create a puddle of raw sienna and Prussian blue. I'm going to go ahead and get some of that pigment in there fairly quickly. I'm going all the way to the top of the painting on this part, at least right in that 1/3 sweet spot, maybe right about there, and bring this down fairly quickly all the way down to something over here where we don't know yet where all that mist is going to go, but do this fairly quick. I've got a juicy area of pigment here. Let's see what I've got in terms of values. It can still be darker, but let's get a little more variety of our color. I'm going to go ahead and put quite a bit of raw sienna right in this middle heart of the matter right here where the sweet spot is, where the interest is going to be. I want these colors to blend on the paper. I want the paint to do the work, not me. So I'm going to give it a chance to blend in intriguing ways by putting quite a bit of raw sienna first. And now I'll come back and touch in some Prussian blue, and we'll get maybe a nice few verticals in there. A little more Prussian blue over here. Ooh, love that color. Bring this down into this misty part of the lake shore. I have some edges that I need to really be thinking about right now. This top edge of these trees needs to tell people that it's trees, not that it's just a mess. And so I'm going to use Prussian more than raw sienna to do that because of that darker value that it has. I can tell that over here, these are on dry paper. I would like them to be a little more vertical, a little more observable tree kind of shapes over there rather than just be kind of little lumpy round things. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my rigger. I'm going across that shape. And you know what? I liked how that dipped and showed mist in the distance more. So I'm going to take a paper towel now and lift some of this paint out because I liked that misty stuff, and I kind of lost that when I brought that Prussian blue across. I'm going to touch some clean water up there and just let that take away some of that those marks that I made with Prussian blue. Clean water, flat 1-inch brush. I'm going to bring it across the bottom of here, and look how much pigment has dribbled down into that area, which I eventually want to be sort of like a lake. So I'm going to mop some of that up with my paper towel. I think I'm ready to use my mister. I kind of watch and wait till I see that it's not shiny wet, it's dull. That tells me that the paper is actually damp, but it's down below the surface. Okay, now let's see what kind of mess I've got over here. I need to define the top edge of this better because right now it looks like just little bumps. So I'm going to take quite a bit. This has quite a bit of Prussian blue in my brush. And you see that very distant stuff, I'm going to go in front of it. I'm going to do darker tree stuff in front of it. Okay, I'm using my rigger. I've got some raw sienna, Prussian blue, and I'm just coming down this line of trees here, turning those little lumps into treetops. I'll throw a few verticals over there, and I need to clean this edge up here. I want it to be a little stronger. I'm going to go back to my pointed brush so I can carry a little more pigment with me when I hit these trees on this area right here. It looks like those should be pretty dramatic, and so I'm going to use this larger brush, not just my rigger, and I'm going to put a vertical in here and get some branches. This edge, not too beautiful, not too crazy about it. I'm going to cover it up by putting trees higher. Throw some verticals down here. Just drawing some lines down through my paint. What do I have up here? Goodness. It's kind of intriguing. I think I'm going to leave that sort of mysterious, and as it dries, I'll need to touch into it a little bit more. I am thinking that this is some water here. This is sort of like a lake. I'm going to just create that misty look, like fog coming off the water most of the way across here. But these trees that are closest to us, I think are going to actually be closer than these back here. That means I need to have another layer of depth by bringing this line down farther. I'm going to leave that line across back in that distant spot, like a little bay in the lake maybe, and I'm going to put some clean water and pull my flat 1-inch brush along that line so that all those bristles are sucking up any pigment that remains, and that'll make that look like a foggy kind of misty watery edge there. This is still a mess right here, and I'm going to cover that mess with some trees that are darker in just a second, but I need to let this dry. While it's drying, I think I want to mist it. I'd like to have that be kind of more intriguing texture, and this is going to put some little water droplets into it. I'm going to take my 1.5 inch flat on my rag and pull a few vertical lines down through here with clean water. And put those pretty close together there, and then maybe a little farther apart over here. And maybe some verticals over here. I like the verticality of it. There's no secret formula about they all have to be vertical. I could create a little branch coming off to the side, or a little branch off up there. Give you a little suggestion of trees, and go back with a little pigment now. This looks like a lot of Prussian blue, so I might lean towards putting a little more raw sienna into my rigger. I'm going to just put the shape of a tree over here, just vertical line of this dark pigment, not all the way to the top, just a little section kind of tree. Put some branches coming out. A little suggestion of branches. It's fine to cross over some of those places where I lifted paint with my flat 1/2 inch brush. This is an abstract painting right here. I'm just putting some designs that are tree-like designs. Vertical trunks, branches coming out at an angle. That suggestion is all that my viewer needs probably to say, oh, there's sort of a forest there. But now, before it gets any drier, I think I am ready to put my darkest trees in, which are closest to us, to our viewer's eye. Actually, I'm a little scared to do that right now, because if I touch any of this part right in here with some pigment on this brush and create a nice tree shape, it would just flood everywhere, and it would make this whole entire painting unrecognizable for what I want it to look like. So I'm going to need to let this dry. Okay, my paper's not completely dry, I can tell, because there's still some wrinkle, a little bit of bumpiness to it, but it's dry enough that I think it won't make my pigment just bleed all over the place when I try to put some other trees in here. This is the time I start to look at things I like and kind of want to leave on the painting, or things that I don't really like and I kind of want to fix up. And I want you to think about the layers that you're creating here. We've got our lightest layer in the back, which is so light you can't even really tell, is that trees, is it clouds? It's just the mistiness of the atmosphere. There's a line of trees that are very indistinct, and then there's some trees that are closest to us. And now these trees I want to be the closest to us of all. Some of these we will still see, of course, because those are pretty dark, and I'm not going to try to paint completely over this line of trees here. To give myself a little bit of guidance, I think I'm going to put a light pencil line right about where I want this next row of trees to stop, and that'll just be a misty bottom edge. It's not going to be a super straight edge, but just want to remind myself what I'm trying to do here. I'm going to use my rigger to start with, just because I have quite a bit of control with it, and I'm going to put some trees now closest to us, but maybe not as tall as these back there. These will be darker. Let's put one right here. And I do like this clump of trees right here. This needs more Prussian, I think. It looks pretty green. That's super green. I'm going to touch a little Prussian into it, touch a little bit of raw sienna into it. By actually letting the paint do the work and blend on my paper, I'm going to make a more interesting painting. Okay, when I get to that line, I'm going to stop, Now I'll throw a couple other trees here without covering up some of that stuff that I like. I need more paint on my paper quicker, so I'm going to get my pointed round brush here. I'm not crazy about how this came out, but I could cover it with a tree right about in here. Just tree shapes. That's just as we practiced on our tree video. Try to throw these in fairly quickly so the paint will blend, it will mix in intriguing ways. But I'm suggesting to my viewer that there are some trees there. And this bottom edge, I think I'm going to use my flat 1-inch brush with clean water on it and just start developing an edge along here. Let that clean water even go up into the trees a little bit, because that will be fine. It'll look more misty. Alternating raw sienna and my Prussian blue, and where they mix, they'll get a nice green, but where they don't, you'll have some intriguing colors. Bring our trees a little higher over here. Make this a pretty raw sienna tree, quite a bit of raw sienna, I should say. Get some more Prussian into it afterwards. Raw sienna, hitting that bottom misty edge. And over here, I'm fine if that just sort of fades out. So I'm going to put some clean water, and let's go into our Prussian and get some darker pigment down in here, darker value, so that that mist is going to show up a little bit for us. Again, I'm just sort of playing around, but I'm conscious of the bottom edge because I really want to keep that soft and misty and kind of mysterious. And in terms of my composition, remember my 1/3 thing, I'm over on the right-hand 1/3 and towards the top. I'm ready now to use my rigger. I've got quite a bit of a mess here, but I'm not scared about it because I can just let that stay pretty misty, even hit it with my misting spray a little bit. And now I'm going to clean up that bottom edge with clean water. And I'll take my 1-inch flat and suck up some of that pigment along that bottom edge. And now with my rigger, concentrating a little bit more on Prussian because I want to be able to see these trees right here. And I think I'm going to put a taller one overlapping right here. Now I'm using a little bit of negative painting here. I'm painting a little bit in the spaces where this Prussian blue tree is sort of peeking through. This looks a little blunt to me. I'm going to try to carry that line higher and overlap some of that raw sienna with some Prussian. I want that to bleed a little bit though. I'll soften it with some clean water. Okay, I'm putting clean water out into this lake because I don't want any of this pigment to dry in a line along there. I want it to look misty. I actually want this bottom edge to look a little mistier than it does. So I'm going to put some clean water, touch it into this pigment. There's a lot of pigment that sort of settled along here, and I'm breaking it up. I want it to be a little more mysterious. Okay, it's a little bit too juicy, too hard to discern specific shapes of those trees in there. So I'm going to let this dry a little more and then touch it where I can control the pigment a little bit better than I can right now. Let me get some of this misty stuff picked up with a paper towel. Comes right up if I loosen it with clean water first. And I'm thinking about this shape. I don't want to just make it a straight line. I want it to be like clouds of mist. So better not to just have a perfectly straight line. Okay, I'm getting towards the end here. It's time to do some of the refinement. I've let it dry enough that now if I define some of these trees a little more clearly, it will be crisp, and that's what I want. We're really playing around with that juxtaposition of vagueness and clear detail. And so I'm trying to have a nice variety, but also kind of have some mystery involved. This is sort of like a wall of trees in the back. I'm now thinking of this as a painting, not as a lake with some water. I'm thinking of it as a design on paper. I want this to be my sweet spot where my viewer really looks, and I want there to be sort of a drama. It's like a play on a stage, and I've got curtains on the side. I'm sort of bringing my viewers to the action. That's why I don't care now if I play around a little bit. It's really about my personal desire, my personal taste, and I'm feeling a little bit like I want to lighten this up. I'm going to go back with some clean water and actually make this even more vague back here, especially I think this edge at the beginning. I'm going to bring some clean water down, and I'm going to take a clean paper towel and just pull that vague, juicy stuff out of there a little bit, and now put a few verticals in that. It's just sort of taking away that hardness of that edge up there. And I'm creating an interesting backdrop for the drama of my most important trees here. So it's just a design. Remember, I'm just making a design on paper. And if I have little details of trees that are sort of vaguely coming out of that mist, that'll be all the better. Down here, I want a cloudy shape, that fog coming off the water maybe. And I'll mist it with my mister, my little spray bottle. Lift a little bit of that out with a paper towel. Go back with a little bit of Prussian blue and maybe put a few trunks or a few branches. Just mysterious shapes of trees back there. Another little hit on my raw sienna to get. Now comes the crucial part. Here's where I want to have more Prussian and less raw sienna because I can't even tell where there's trees here. Everything looks kind of intriguing over here. I have this pretty strong tree right here. I'm going to continue it, but I'm going to skip a little area and continue it down here. This just makes it a little bit more intriguing, makes it sort of play hide and seek a little bit with my viewer. Maybe put a few branches going across here. Not just have a bunch of trees all lined up like little soldiers, because I think it makes it far more intriguing. It's a little more mysterious, harder to understand what's going on, but lets my viewer do some of the work. I've got vertical things I can play with. Put in a nice vertical here, even go clear up here. And put in some raw sienna down here to kind of blend with all that strong Prussian blue. This tree right here, don't know if you can see it, but this is bugging me. This right in here, that it's made mostly with raw sienna, and it just looks like a tree that has a round top that's very confusing. So I'm going to get some more Prussian into here and kind of give a better tree shape, maybe past that little misty spot, and have some branches come off of that. Okay, that's fine. I don't care about now. That looks better to me, more balanced. This one looks like a blunt top, and I'm going to actually cross over in front of those ones in the background. So I'm going to put darker pigment up here so that this tree, actually I even need more Prussian blue on my rigger right now. So I have a nice dark top up there. I can skip a little bit if I need to, right there maybe. And a little finer detail here. I flick my brush out so I don't have those awkward kind of rounded branch shapes sticking out over that water. Okay, darkness, lightness. I'm going to vary it a little bit, put a little bit of raw sienna to start bleeding into that. Now I'm just alternating so I have a little more variety. Any place that it seems kind of awkwardly straight, I try to kind of blur it. Throw in a few little spots of pigment in there. I'm going to hit this with my spray bottle. And now I need to really start thinking about how I will finish this off. I would say that I have a couple of choices. I can have some water all the way to the bottom, or I could have some foreground, as if I'm standing on a shore and I'm looking across over at those trees. I'm not crazy about this right here, where this tree goes up and then there's this dark top. I think I'm going to lift out some of that Prussian. I'm fine if this tree is leaning a little bit, but it looks like it started growing this way and then it turned, and that's not the way nature picture usually does it. Well, let's fix this a little bit. I'm going to go a little farther now, even higher. I used my raw sienna. I'm leaning these branches over the water a little bit and let those mix. And then this big gap that I had is no longer going to be there, I don't think. I didn't really like that big gap. So again, I'll just touch some Prussian. And I'm thinking about a little bit of a design, a little pattern. I've got this tree kind of pointing out the farthest, and that seems fine to me. But I would like to have some of those dark spots continue back into the tree designs. So I'm going to just put a little bit more Prussian. I can sort of see a dark pattern moving its way back into the background. And maybe even a little bit more Prussian down in here. Just using my rigger just for a little bit of fun and variety. Mist it, splatter a little bit on there, touch up those top little marks. I think I can live with that. So let's solve this problem of our foreground. The reason that watercolor painting is so compelling is because now I kind of want to paint this again so I can try different ways. And that's what I will do. When in doubt, just paint it again. But let's try this one where we basically do a reverse graded wash. So I'm going to leave mistiness towards the baseline of these trees and come down towards some water that you can actually see, maybe even see some ripples in the water. I'll do that by getting all this bottom area where the water is going to be covered with some clean water first, okay, all the way up to where that misty line below the trees hits. Okay, I want that to be those cloudy, misty shapes right there. Now, it's just a graded wash, but we're going the other direction. You could turn your paper upside down. I'm going to use a little more Prussian blue than raw sienna, but I'm not going to leave my basic palette. My two colors are Prussian blue and raw sienna, and I'm sticking with it. That's because I want there to be unity in this painting, and I'll tell you the easiest way to assure that you've got some unity, that it kind of goes together, is by keeping your colors the same. If I now dipped into my ultramarine or I dipped into my cerulean blue, suddenly this would look less consistent, less like it all has some harmony. I have more Prussian down there at the bottom, but now I'm going to go ahead and add some more raw sienna. It kind of looks like green water. Hey, let's lighten the top edge here. I really want that to fade out as it gets up towards that misty area where the trees are. And now to tell people that that's water, I think I'm going to put a few wave patterns. If I just draw my brush across, sweep a few little wave shapes, that will tell people that they're looking out across sort of a misty lake. It's pretty important that this top edge be really soft. And so again, I have to kind of go back with some clean water and keep cleaning that up. It's fine to use my spray bottle on this water area. Kind of feel like I want to touch a little bit of Prussian blue into this, just maybe down in this corner. Kind of follow those wave patterns. I guess we're in a boat and we've just rowed out to take a look at those trees. This is the problem of having dirty paper towels laying around. Okay, get a clean paper towel and some clean water on it and get that spot of Prussian blue off of there. I'm going to just put a mat over this so I can kind of take a look and see how I like it as a painting, as a design on paper. And this mat helps me kind of zero in on that a little bit. Let's see, I'll put it right about there. And I think what I notice is that it would be helpful to have a little more light. I like these vertical light patterns coming down, but what if I continue those over in this area as well? This is still somewhat wet here. I'm using my 1/2 inch flat brush dried out on a rag or paper towel, and I'm just putting a little bit of verticals in here, maybe down here. Again, I kind of like to keep it an odd number, so I might just touch in that tree, hit some more down here. I'd like to mist that one more time. and it needs to dry. Let's not just work this one to death. Let's go on and try it again, and maybe this time think about putting maybe some of a foreground in here. We've created atmosphere. We've created a very soft, morning, misty kind of atmospheric landscape. Well, there you have it. I hope that you had a chance on this painting to use a lot of clean water and create a very misty landscape. One thing I notice on mine is that my paper buckled more, and I could even see some fibers of the paper coming off. That indicates a less expensive paper, and also it reminds me I can do better on these kinds of paintings if I stretch the paper ahead of time. I have a short video showing you how to do that. In our next lesson, we'll continue to explore that idea of how can we create atmosphere and mystery in our paintings. There's a wonderful poem by Wendell Berry about the peace that nature can bring to us. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests, in his beauty, on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I'm free. Hi, I'm Bob. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you'll go by my website at watercolorwithbob.com. That's where you'll find an interactive outline of the whole course. You can also share your work with me and your fellow students. One thing I really love about watercolor is how accessible it is. That's why I realized it was important to me to put this course out for free. That said, it would mean the world to me if you would support this work. You can like it, you could share it with your friends, you could subscribe to the channel, you could also visit the gift shop or even make a donation. Thanks so much. See you on the next lesson, and happy painting. Oh, the water's starting to run all over the place.